Hey, Table Rock, this week we looked at Psalm 146, and we saw that our hope, our help, our salvation comes not from man, but from God. We saw that Psalm 146 then calls us, it says, don't put your trust in man. The terms it uses are princes or son of man. Instead of putting your trust in man, it calls us to put our trust in Yahweh, in God. It argues that putting your trust in man it's foolish. It says man will always fail you. He's going to die, and with him his plans will perish. But then it drew the comparison to our God who is faithful forever, who reigns over all the earth, and who actually saves. So as we look to apply this psalm now to our lives, perhaps the easiest question to ask ourselves is that when we are in times of trial, when we're in need, things are hard, where do we go for help? Or to use the words that the psalm uses, what are some of the princes, whether it's literal people or schemes of man, that you tend to put your trust into? And why do you think those have a draw for you? Following up on that question, we tend to fight against tendencies like putting our trust in man by looking at promises in the Word. So what are some ways, maybe in the past and in ways going forward, that you can fight against the temptation of putting your trust in man? I mentioned how one of my struggles is people-pleasing, putting my trust in people's approval. And even this morning, I looked at 6 different scriptures that talked about seeking God's approval and not man's. Help me fight against this temptation. So what are some ways that you fight against putting your trust in man? I want to encourage life groups this week by testimonies of times in the past where maybe we have put our trust in Yahweh. We've put our trust in God and not in man. So would you think back to some kind of scenario, something that happened in your life where you chose not to trust man but chose to trust God? And would you maybe share that with the group this evening to encourage one another? Finally, a way to apply this is there are millions of people around the world who are putting their trust in man for salvation, whether the man's name is Buddha, or maybe it's an African tribe in the middle of nowhere we know very little about, but they're putting their trust in other things, and they need to hear the good news that God alone saves. So my question as we try to apply this is, have you ever thought about going international to share the good news? Maybe some of you already have, maybe short-term or long-term. And do you have some testimonies to share with us about what that was like and sharing this good news? Well, Table Rock, we saw that our hope and our help and our salvation comes from God alone, not from man. May this be a sweet reminder to you this week.